Open world games have this horrible habit of making the way you navigate their huge, detailed, supposed to encourage exploration style environments incredibly, ridiculously, stupidly boring. Take a look at the big players in the past few years and you'll see a lot of the same stuff. Walking, sprinting, riding a horse, or driving a car. Oh, and fast travel. To avoid going on a 10-minute tirade about how fast travel is a burden on open world game design, because Razbuten already has that covered, I'll summarize by saying that open world games tend to rely on fast travel, and it makes getting around the map generally kinda suck as a consequence. Sure, it saves you time, but it ends up discouraging exploration in favor of efficiency. It's a shame, not just because these worlds have the potential to be so much more than bumpy boxes you teleport across, but also because how a player moves around in and interacts with the world they inhabit is an important means of self-expression within games. Think about how many times you've decided to mash your face against a mountain while furiously jumping in an Elder Scrolls game. Or how badass it felt to base jump in Far Cry, even though you could have had an easier time just driving to your destination. I still remember janking my way into the Ironforge airport with my dad and brother in World of Warcraft before it was a location with quest givers and stuff like that. Movement is so much more than how we get from Kokiri Forest to Death Mountain. It's an extension of ourselves within the game world that gives players the opportunity to define their characters while potentially creating unique memories. Problem is, it's all too common for open world games to ignore this opportunity. But I mean, there are some games that do more with movement. Mirror's Edge Catalyst allows for a whole slew of environmental interactions and demands more of the player than just pressing up on the control stick. You have to think about your route through an area on a much more technical level, and there's a fair amount of focus involved in executing some of the more interesting movement combinations you can perform. And I'll admit that this is a bit of an extreme approach to the issue, and even Catalyst falls prey to some of the shortcomings of modern open-world traversal. But hey, you want to know a game that finds a solid middle ground between demand of the player, ease of traversal, interesting overworld activities, and plenty of room for self-expression? Well, get ready, because we're talking about Sunset Overdrive, baby! Woo! Sunset Overdrive not only gives players some entertaining movement mechanics right off the bat, but it also makes it clear that it understands how important movement is for player expression, allowing every single opportunity it can to use these systems to express yourself and have fun while roaming around the vibrant, wacky world you find yourself in. Sunset Overdrive wastes no time establishing the weird physics and cartoonish nature of its world. The main character breaks the fourth wall, the weapons you use all fit in your pockets at once, most of the cutscenes are accentuated with action lines or exaggerated angles, and the physics themselves are very clearly malleable and playful. After the prologue, it's not hard to suspend your disbelief and accept the fact that your character runs on walls, grinds on power lines, skis on water, bounces on cars, and dashes mid-air to get around the city. It all comes together in a way that's more cohesive than you'd expect for a title that's so chaotic, and the idea is really sold thanks to all the little details present in cutscenes and gameplay. It allows you to give yourself over to the idea of the screwed up Adult Swim cartoon world that you're stuck in. From there, the writing and gameplay take the reins as they snowball to levels of ridiculous you'd really only see in a cartoon, and bam, you're there. Gameplay can be whatever crazy thing you think of. Thankfully, the devs use their powers for good and utilize that freedom to mix things up with some great arenas for combat and interesting challenges in the overworld, which are, I might add, all focused on movement. So now that we've established the fact that the physics in Sunset Overdrive don't act like they do in the real world, okay, fucking hit that checkbox, we can do pretty much whatever the hell we want. By giving the player all these wild movement capabilities that flow together, Insomniac have pretty much solved the traversal problems that open world games tend to suffer from. Getting from point A to point B is now more than just going forward, thanks to how many different options you have in the moment-to-moment trailblazing that you do. Because it's all tied to the same handful of buttons, the issue that Mirror's Edge Catalyst has demanding too much attention is solved, and you're able to look around the environment for secrets, activities, and other routes you can take. Since all the side activities and missions focus on movement or traversal as a central mechanic in different ways, the importance of utilizing and experimenting with these abilities is cemented and encouraged. Plus, it's just fun! Oh yeah, as a little bit of a kicker, Sunset Overdrive does have fast travel. It's as easy as opening up the map and vooping over to where you want to go, but because of how fun and expressive the movement is, I just never used it. Honestly, I totally forgot that I could teleport until the player character reminded me it was possible 3 or 4 hours later, and even then I opted out of using it because I just like moving around this dang city. Now that I'm sitting here and writing this, I can see how saying the movement is expressive can come across a bit weird, so let me explain. In animation, a character's body language is emphasized a bit to portray bits of their personality without spelling them out. I'm sure there's some fancy technical term for that methodology, but I don't know it. Suffice to say, movement and idle animations and exaggerations give insight into a character's goals and personality, or just the tone of the moment-to-moment, what you're watching. In Sunset Overdrive, that concept's been applied to the animations and methods you use to get around the world. Your character is already an extension of yourself thanks to all the customization options you get, and because of how games work on a conceptual level, but the amount of detail and choice in movement around the area you're in kinda just amps that up by a couple factors and turns simple traversal methods into a deeper form of self-expression for anyone that picks up the controller. If you had to get around the world like this, I don't think I'd consider it as much a strong way of expressing yourself as it is, because instead of choosing to move around the world how you do, you'd be forced into it, and choice is a big part of how we express ourselves in our day-to-day lives. But hey, that's just another thing that Sunset gets right. It gives you the option. You don't need to mix up how you get around. It's pretty easy to get almost anywhere by just grinding on power lines or handrails, or God forbid, fast travel. And yet, because of how easily bouncing on cars blends with running on walls and grinding on practically anything, it's enticing to do so. And before long, it becomes second nature to those who opt to mix things up. It also opens up self-imposed challenges for players. Limitations you put on yourself, just to see if you can do a certain thing within certain parameters. I found myself trying to touch the ground as little as possible while switching movement methods around enough to keep my combo meter bumping. Yeah, sure, you don't need to get your next quest without touching the ground, but I mean, why not, right? You don't need to bounce around on cars if you don't want to, so don't, just grind on stuff. It's up to you as much as it's up to you which pair of shoes you wear and how you style your hair. Just like the choices you make when you wake up, movement allows you to express yourself within the world of Sunset Overdrive and makes world traversal not only fun, but kinda worth it. Since Sunset's release in 2014, we've had a bunch of open world games come out, and while some managed to break the mold in terms of traversal, we still very frequently see a lot of the same stuff. I could sit here and contemplate on and on about why Sunset Overdrive failed to set an example, but I'll leave this tidbit. There's absolutely nothing wrong with your open world game using standard methods of movement. It's totally fine if you have to walk, drive a car, or whatever to get from point A to point B. And hell, honestly, it's totally fine if you have fast travel. The important thing to take away from Sunset Overdrive is that it's important for the world itself to be interesting enough for the player to want to explore, and the movement methods you give the player are a huge part of them wanting to do that. The toys we have available in your world are something that we can and will use to express ourselves. So give us something fun.